Hi everyone, this is a follow-up video to the pre-cancerous video that I posted a few months or weeks back. So my patient history is pretty complex, so it can confuse even doctors about what was going on with me. But just because I was more self aware about my health and I had the educational background to understand my own blood reports, I was able to reach the conclusions I reached. And if I hadn't taken certain preventative care measures, I'm pretty sure within a few years I would have reached the cancerous stage. So, let me first summarize in the previous video what were the symptoms that were happening with me before I had gone to a thyroid related doctor and multiple thyroid related doctor to examine what was happening with my thyroid organ, because there are a bunch of doctors. There were like 4 different healthcare providers I went to just for getting this problem of nodules re-examined in India. Whereas in US, I had also visited 3 or 4 doctors likewise to get this examined and detected as a nodule when initially it had been detected in US. So the thyroid problem that had persisted, that was detected initially almost right now it's been 14 years, almost 14 years back, the thyroid problem that had been detected, or maybe more than 14 years, that thyroid small nodules in near the thyroid organ had increased in size over time of exposure to different carcinogens and other toxins in our environment, and then not only increased in size, it had increased and impacted my health such that I got symptoms that showed that my thyroid organ area was impacted, and which was the thyroid storm symptoms that I was describing in the previous video, where my skin had started becoming leathery, where I had sunlight sensitivity, where I was sweating intensely, where I had erratic heart rate, and all other thyroid storm related symptoms that lasted in my body for a few months. And by the time though I did go to the doctor, most of the and hair fall, most of those symptoms of thyroid storm had subsided. I had only currently at that point, when I had reached the doctor after having suffered for 3-4 months of thyroid storm, I had only the sunlight sensitivity symptom, the leathery skin had also gone away, and I had the hair fall symptom. Other than that, any other remnants of the thyroid issue had gone by then. But I was also so weakened by the time I had reached this doctor, because other multiple ancillary factors were going on in my body, that I hadn't even thought of going to this doctor. Before going to this doctor, in fact, I had gone to the ER instead, because I kept getting breathing related issues where, or heart rate. My heart was impacted the most for almost 1.5 years before I went to this thyroid doctor. And that was the thing that made me think she was not a great doctor, because she didn't examine. Even though I mentioned to her the heart rate problem, I was completely like panicking over the fact that my heart is not functioning well, and the most likely culprit at that time came up in my thoughts was the thyroid. But I knew that it wasn't just the thyroid problem that was causing my heart rate to be erratic. I had the increased inflammation in the body that can also impact cardiac health. I had increased our allergic hypersensitivity reactions. There are certain allergic hypersensitivity reactions called anaphylactic reactions, and when you suffer through an anaphylactic reaction, sometimes people get respiratory arrest and cardiac arrest. And I had reached, like, I didn't reach respiratory arrest or cardiac arrest, but I was in the brink of reaching those two problems. But I couldn't explain it to anyone, because unless you experience that in your body, people very rarely understand how you can reach the brink of death and come back from it. So for me, it was something like that. I knew, like, it was very simple things that were happening to me. Like, in the previous video, I said I used to have only simpler allergies like just sneezing, but over a year and a half before I went to the thyroid doctor, for that whole 1.5 year, I had increasing allergies to different things. As I said, I had metal allergy. Right now, this has been another 2.5 years since I visited this doctor. My metal allergy has gone away. Some of the food allergies have gone away, because suddenly I developed allergy even to things like paneer. Like, paneer was a food that I consumed like almost weekly in my life since childhood days. Sometimes 3-4 times a week I would consume paneer. But at that phase, when I was in heightened inflammatory stages, where my body was hypersensitive to different chemicals and toxins, any kind of paneer that had preservatives or additional chemicals or other things going on, when going wrong with it, if I just took a small bite of a paneer piece once, and I felt my throat was choking up. Like, I felt like my pipes here were just clamping up and I can't breathe anymore. I had to do like some energy healing, and I had to do some breathing exercises to make sure this clogged pipe way feeling that I was feeling would go away. Or prior to these paneer like food related allergies that were happening, not just with paneer, it happened with soybeans also, and that's what the test showed, that I had yeast allergy. And so, not soybeans but soy based soya sauce has yeast in it, and I used to love eating Chinese food as well, and soya sauce was the favorite thing I used to add to all my Chinese dishes. But soya sauce based food was giving me an allergy also, because of this reason, that the yeast allergy limits had reached in my body, and my body was toxed out from some different yeasts, possibly in different kinds of food. And that's what I mentioned in that video, that I was falling asleep when I was eating breads because of the yeast content in those breads. And I could also start smelling, like I had also, because I was doing energy healing, my sixth sense had developed a little bit. So sometimes I could smell higher content of yeast in certain foods, higher content of mold in certain foods. I started avoiding even mold in foods, because many of our Indian homes, when we store our lentils, and not just our homes, the lentils that come to our homes from the market likewise are stored somewhere by a wholesaler or retailer for years and years before it comes to our homes. So those lentils have also started spoiling in the kind of atmosphere we have on earth currently, and the way in which those lentils have been raised, the plant products have been raised and processed, has led to this degradation of these foods. So I started smelling even mold and other contaminations in the lentils in our food, pesticide contamination in the lentils, and all of which, I even though I smelled it, sometimes, if you don't have a choice and you're hungry, you would cook whatever food you had at home. So some of these contaminated food I would eat, and then I would immediately get either a healthcare reaction from a pesticide based poisoning acute effects, or I would start getting this drowsiness and lethargy and sleepiness from consuming food with too much mold or yeast in them. So this was also simultaneously going on while I was experiencing the thyroid storm like symptom, and I was experiencing the weight loss phases of cancerous conditions. So now coming back to the cancerous condition. So she had not just ordered an ultrasound test, she had also ordered some tests to see if someone has usually thyroid related or parathyroid related cancer, sometimes their calcium levels are high. So she had also, apart from checking the thyroid hormones, put a test for calcium levels. And in case of certain cancers, if your calcium levels are more than 10 or 11 or 12, that means you have a certain kind of cancer, depending on what are the symptoms and what are the diagnostic criteria you meet for those cancers. For me, my calcium levels were just short of the 10 limit. So my level was like 9.6 or 9.8. And the only reason my calcium levels had gone down to 9.6 and wasn't 10 or 12 was because for months before I went to this doctor and did these blood tests recommended by her, I had been getting these allergies to paneer and allergies to calcium containing food that had mold and yeast in it. And because I was having allergies to any calcium containing food, my consumption of calcium based food that I used to have earlier as a regular part of my meals, like I would have a dal in lunch and paneer in dinner, or chole in lunch, paneer in dinner, and my eating habits had also reduced prior to visiting this doctor. I used to eat 3 meals a day or 4 meals a day previously when I used to work, but when I stopped working and I was not having too much physical intense activity going on in my life, I would only eat 2 meals a day, a brunch around 12 o'clock and a dinner around 8 o'clock. And in between, if I did ever feel a hunger, I would have either fruits or a biscuit or some nuts or some ice cream. So I would have a light snack in the middle. But I only had mostly 2 major meals in the day, in the afternoon time around 12 and then in the night time around 8. But what started happening because of these increasing allergies and health responses to contaminated food, I had reduced eating calcium based foods in my diet. So if I had continued my normal calcium based food in my diet, I'm sure this blood report would have been over 10, and then I would have been detected as a cancer patient. But just because my blood report wasn't over 10, and also when they did a pathology of this, they saw that the nodules had only converted into open lesion like wounds. They had categorized it as benign, but it would be cancerous if my blood report, or if I had added more toxins to my body, because I slowly started to realize which are the toxins that are causing me to fall sicker and sicker, and I stopped consuming those food products, stopped consuming like for my thyroid problems. Eventually I realized that overexposure to the phone radiation was also causing and increasing the pain in this area. So what I started doing after I realized I've got a lesion in this area was to reduce my either cut down a little bit of my phone time, which was very hard for me. So I haven't yet been able to cut down my phone time. Being a single person, being very interested in writing, and because I was very sick and not really up to like sitting up and writing while sitting down on a laptop, most of the time I was just lying on the bed, and despite being very weak in health and not being able to be mobile anymore, or if I was walking, I was feeling extreme distress while walking. I really experienced heart failure type symptoms, but again, a doctor didn't believe me. A doctor didn't understand that a person who looks like me could have heart failure. So unfortunately, but everything that can match heart failure like symptoms, I was experiencing some of those symptoms as well. And that was happening because I was having thyroid problems, I was having allergic response problems, I was having pesticide contamination from water supply and food related problems. I was also experiencing thyroid storm. I might have experienced a cytokine storm from other flu like symptoms as well. My body had completely toxed out, and whatever intense workouts or moderate level workouts that my body was capable of doing few years back, suddenly my body stopped doing it. It just couldn't take it. If anyone has ever done Surya Namaskar, they will know it's a complex yoga exercise involving 12-13 poses of yoga moves. And while doing that Surya Namaskar exercise, as it is, my body's heart health I have always felt was not at an optimum level. I've always had some heart related issues, like even when I went on moderate to moderate level treks with friends, I would be the slowest in the group. Every time I have been on a trek with anyone, be it a larger group, be it a smaller group, I've always been the slowest person in the group because my heart simply couldn't take even the small moderate level treks. And that was when I used to work out in the gym for 1.5 hour daily, 5-6 days a week. And But after coming to India, I had stopped working out in a gym. Instead, I would do either yoga exercises or moderate level Zumba exercises at home, or go out for long 1.5 hour walks daily. So all these physical mobility activities that I used to do before getting sick, suddenly my heart just couldn't take it. And this part, even though I explained it to a cardiac doctor, also I went to a cardiologist as well, even he didn't understand that someone can suddenly become so sick. And he just attributed everything to anemia. And even though my report, when I did a stress test. While doing the stress test, the cardiac assistant who was taking the stress test, she got worried, like after the fourth or fifth level of the stress test, when I was doing higher level stress test, she could see that I was getting distressed while running on the machine, and she didn't go into the higher levels. She just stopped the test at a certain level. So now this is the problem. If a doctor wants to detect that something is wrong with you, you have to allow the patient to reach a certain level of detection in the diagnosis, because of the way the doctors are nowadays in India. Because unfortunately, this is the problem with Indian doctors, or those doctors who are very diagnostic report based doctors. They do not understand the patient's issues. They do not communicate with the assistant also, who is doing the stress test. If he would have communicated with the assistant, he would have heard her at least say that, if she was doing higher level test, she was getting into distress, and the assistant is afraid that I shouldn't get a heart attack or something. That's why she stopped the test midway. But unfortunately, because she stopped the test midway, the test didn't detect any kind of abnormal readings in the cardiac report that came out from the stress test. And I think it was ECG or EKG. I am a little dyslexic about ECG and EKG, so I forgot what it was. But another thing that came abnormal in my test was also ignored by the doctor. He's like, oh, that's a normal thing that many women have in their body. But here is the problem. If many women have this anomaly in a body, there is possibly some logical reason behind those people having that anomaly, and it is also likely possible, even if it is a common anomaly amongst many women, it is also possible that that same common anomaly could be the cause of their heart problems and other health issues related to heart and other organs that are interconnected with our heart. Our heart is not just an organ functioning on its own in our body. Along with our heart, we have our lungs, we have our kidneys, we have the blood circulatory system, all of which are jointly doing some functional processes, which, if heart is disrupted and is not functioning properly, can disrupt the lung functions, can disrupt the kidney functions, can disrupt other bodies' functions if adequate supply of blood is not going to the other parts of the body. So that's why that doctor as well, I couldn't go back to that doctor, because I was like, and he, instead of focusing on the main heart problems that I was having related to either pollution related effects from the water or the thyroid effect that I had, and I wanted a doctor to possibly just monitor my health over time rather than give me a prescription. But most modern doctors who are diagnostic report based doctors, they look at a test and they only want to prescribe a medicine to a patient, and that's it. Even though for this reason, even though I hadn't really gone to him for getting a prescription for a medicine, especially not for cholesterol, because what happened, my cholesterol came high by 1 or 2 points, and not all criteria of cholesterol were high, just one cholesterol criteria was high. I think it was the total cholesterol which was slightly higher or something. And instead of if I was in US, and as a pharmacist, this is what I have studied as a US pharmacist, trained pharmacist, who has the capacity to counsel patients also on these health issues, where if your cholesterol levels are only 1 or 2 points higher, according to the American Heart Association guidelines or many other associations who give guidelines about cardiac health, you are only supposed to do dietary control to manage your 1-2 point high cholesterol levels. You do not directly start taking medications. which an Indian doctor is just simply unaware about, or he thinks if a patient has come and given you a history of half an hour history about their health, that you should prescribe a drug, which is the mentality I don't understand. I couldn't explain to him that this is not why I have come to you. I want, being a cardiologist, I wanted him to examine my cardiac health, not prescribe a medicine to prevent me from high cholesterol. My high cholesterol also had a reason behind it, which has got, I think right now, got eliminated. If I don't eat outside food a lot, then also my cholesterol would be low. If I don't eat too much oily food, then also my cholesterol levels would be low. So there were many preventative things, like, and if I would again start back on exercising to the levels that I used to exercise, I would have low cholesterol, right? But because I was not mobile and not able to walk, naturally many of the other systems of my body which was functioning at an optimal level had gone down while I had gone sick. Now, coming back to the thyroid lesion and also the confusing multiple myeloma diagnosis. Okay, so now let's look at the thyroid related issues. One thing was, I couldn't get the thyroid cancer diagnosis because my calcium levels were not as high, which would have given them a diagnostic criteria to examine further if it is cancerous or not. But because I had pain, the radiological suggestion was to do further pathological examination to see whether it is cancerous or not. And what happened was, the lady who was taking extracts from different nodules in this area, that doctor, when she was taking different extracts, she took like 4 or 5 samples from 5 different zones of my thyroid and parathyroid region. And the needle she had used, even though it was supposed to be a FNAC, she was using a thicker needle. And this part I understand because I had a diagnosis of FNAC and FNAC procedure in US, and being a pharmacist, I have injected patients with needles, so I understand the different needles also. When the needle is not fine, when the needle is a little thicker, all those I have the discernment that other people who are not in the pharmaceutical industry or who haven't been a pharmacist working in US, they will not know about this. So I knew she was using a thicker needle. The second thing was, while she was trying to get to the parathyroid region nodule, she somehow hit a little bit more deeper than the surface nodule. So she had gone a little deeper, and she might have hit either the bone or the blood vessels near the bone of the parathyroid region when she was trying to extract sample from the nodule. So now, do you understand why there is a possibility that the pathologist who did the testing initially had a question mark about multiple myeloma? I'll tell you if you don't understand it. Because if it was like, say you are looking for a needle in a haystack, but while looking for a needle in a haystack and doing testing to, like, maybe using a magnet to extract the needle out, while extracting the needle out, say instead of a needle you manage to extract a old coin out from a haystack. Now the person who is a pathologist was searching for a needle, but instead of looking for the needle, she found a coin. So she will be confused. Like, this procedure is done for patients who have nodules, and those nodules will look a certain way. If you have thyroid cancer, a pathologist knows. I don't know, because I'm not a pathologist, so I don't know how different thyroid cancer cell looks from a multiple myeloma cancer cell. I can look it up because I do have the capacity to look that up and understand the medical report and the pathological histopathology of how a cancer cell will look when it is a thyroid cancer versus how a cancer cell will look when it is a multiple myeloma cancer. I know I can look it up. But what I already knew, or what I have already looked up, is that, and what you people who are not aware of different kinds of cancer need to understand, is that the cancer that will be on a thyroid nodule will look a little different from a cancer that is inside our blood or bone, which is what multiple myeloma is. But because this doctor had accidentally extracted samples not just from the thyroid nodule, they had also extracted sample from the blood area behind the thyroid organ or parathyroid organ, they might have managed to extract some of my blood. And that blood, because I bled also in this area, there was blood coming out because of the way she had pushed the needle, and so I know that she had extracted some blood sample as well, and because of which I was essentially having not just precancerous thyroid cancer related condition, I was also suffering from precancerous multiple myeloma condition. And multiple myeloma is something whose criteria also, when I looked up later on, I found that I was matching many of those criterias, and some of those criterias I hadn't just crossed the threshold of being a multiple myeloma diagnosis as well, because some of the immunoglobulin levels that were high in my body was there, the blood report of having low hemoglobin was there, some of the other red bloods RBC related parameters like hematocrit count and other parameters like that were also somehow matching cancerous conditions. And if I hadn't stopped consuming again foods that can lead to cancer, like if I hadn't stopped consuming pesticide laced foods, or if I had continued consuming pesticide laced foods, eventually I would get a multiple myeloma diagnosis. So this is where because eventually some of those immunoglobulin levels would have been high enough, some of the calcium levels would have been high enough for them to then put me in the multiple myeloma diagnostic criteria. But just because I had done some preventative care, I was not there at the cancer stages. But can you imagine if you have two kinds of cancer running through your body or precancerous condition developing in your body, are you going to be sick or are you going to be healthy, fit and fine and able to do normal walking, normal running, normal exercise, normal activities that everyone else does, right? You're not going to be able to do that. So this aspect, just because I look healthy, I look chubby, I look actually, because I don't have kids and I wasn't married for a long time, I don't have the stress of a normal 40-year-old Indian woman. Most women my age who are 40 look very tired, look very haphazard. Like very few women in their 40s in India look like the way I look. So because of that reason also, these doctors didn't believe me when I went to them about feeling debilitated. And the point was, when I was actually in the worst stages of my health conditions of related to cancer or whatever else that was happening, I was precancerous conditions, let's call it precancerous, because I didn't get a cancer diagnosis. So but I was very much debilitated, like a cancer patient would be debilitated, and I had almost all the symptoms that surround cancer diagnosis. So what happened was that I was extremely immobile and not able to walk, not able to breathe sometimes when toxic exposure in the environment was high, all of which because I was so debilitated, I didn't even have the energy to walk to a doctor when I was looking my worst, when I was feeling my worst, when I had the peak symptoms of any of the health conditions that I was going through. After 3-4 months of going through the appetite loss phase, I went to the doctor, cardiologist, about appetite loss, about blood loss and things like that. And so again, when I went to the cardiologist also with some of the health problems, he didn't believe it. He ignored also some of the health problems that did show up in the reports. So the thing is, there's a lot of gaps in healthcare that happens in India, also happens in US and other countries as well. And one gap that is prevalent globally is people do not correlate their daily activities to the deteriorating factors related to their health, which I did correlate eventually, and which led me to understand that if I stopped the pesticide exposure from food, water, air, I wouldn't get as sick as I would if I continued the exposure to it. So like I was living in a society where the society were not ready to stop spraying, and when I was really sick, I was ordering food from outside because I couldn't cook for myself. And when ordering food from outside, I found that most of the restaurants there were doing some hygiene practices that were really terrible. So there were pesticide contamination, cross contaminations happening in the food ordered from those restaurants, multiple restaurants in that area, which led me to get sicker and sicker. So I figured out which restaurants don't do good food hygiene based on the food that supply that was coming from them, because they don't understand. And I'll make a video on food hygiene next, in my next video. But there was pesticide exposure from building maintenance, there was other chemical exposure from people spraying pesticides and other chemicals in the plants in the neighborhood buildings. There were construction also going on, that was also impacting my lung functions. Then there was mold problems in my house that was impacting my health. Mold in the food in my house, and right now I'm in my father's place, in his place as well. The municipality here sprays pesticides every time, and I knew I was having pesticide poisoning symptoms, which came next. That was another 6 months later when many of the symptoms related to pesticide poisoning started happening, especially during the summertime, when just before the rainy season they were spraying everywhere to make sure that or during the rainy season they were spraying everywhere. In the month of June, July, August, they sprayed so much around the neighborhoods in this area that every time they were spraying, I was monitoring at that time my pulse oxygen meter levels, and my perfusion levels, perfusion index was low at the time. I was feeling breathless, I was not feeling healthy. But the thing is, I went to the ER a couple of times, and the ER doctors at the time were only looking at COVID patients, at the time only looking at really seriously ill patients. So even though if my heart rate came up, increased heart rate, they ignored it, and they do not understand that perfusion index is important. They also do not understand that when I'm going to a hospital ER or a hospital which has good HEPA filters, any kind of breathing distress I may be having outside the hospital areas where we don't have those kind of filtration systems will not show up in a hospital. So this also many modern doctors just do not understand about their patients. They think the patients are making up symptoms when they are not. The patients are really seriously ill, and just because you're not diagnostically able to look at it when the patient is actually distressed, many doctors ignore those symptoms of their patients. So with the pesticide contamination, I realized like when I don't have any pesticides nearby in the environment, in the air, or in the cross contaminations in the water, or in the food that got sprayed while, that's the food hygiene one I'll make. But food, air, water, clothes are the places where pesticides can contaminate us, and also hidden corners of our homes and places we work, where if pesticides have been sprayed even months or years back, sometimes there could be pesticide remnants present in the walls and surfaces, all of which make us unhealthy. All of us brings our immune system in hyperdrive, and then our immune system starts dying, which is what happened to me. I had heightened immunity, and then now slowly my heightened immune responses have reduced, but that doesn't mean that my body's toxic limits of pesticide contamination has gone away. I still have cardiac issues from pesticide contamination. I still have liver issues from pesticide contamination. My liver tests also showed that my liver enzyme levels were high, meaning that the liver is in a hyperactive state trying to eliminate toxins from the body, but it wasn't able to do it because the pesticide and other chemical contaminations kept piling up in my body from the contaminated water supply, from the contaminated food that we get here. And I tried to escape this by traveling twice outside Mumbai last year and this year, and it does help because when you travel outside Mumbai, there the pesticides used might be less, the other air pollutants in the environment are much less. So air pollution wise, my health became better. But water pollution wise, water pollution is rampant globally around India and also in US, because I had water pollution related health issues in US, which I correlated now, and I understand now better that what I was experiencing in US when I lived there related to water was a water pollution related health impact. But just because I was healthier at the time, I was only in my 20s when I lived my most of my life in US was whole of my 20s, and half of my 30s I lived in US. So these 20s and 30s are the years when you are the healthiest in your body. So that's why the contamination effects are minor at the time. But by the 40s and 50s, our body has piled up enough toxins from our water, food, air, and everything we do in our lives, that slowly the symptoms of the chemicals that we are using in our daily lives, or unknowingly getting exposed to without knowing that there are chemical exposures happening from our food, water, clothes, that are impacting our health. Which is why I'm making this video, so that people can understand that how normal things in their lives are causing them, some things that are considered to be normal and safe to use also are causing a health impact in their body in such a way that they are getting sicker. But because sometimes you are getting sicker from multiple sources and multiple contaminations and multiple things are going wrong in your body, sometimes the doctors also don't realize that you are much sicker than how you're presenting in your lab reports or how you're presenting to a doctor. Because of the multiple reasons that I mentioned here, there are many more reasons why a doctor can misunderstand or misdiagnose a patient, or only partially understand what was going wrong with the patient. Some of it is also got to do with the fact that in India the ratio of doctors to the general population is high, so the doctors only are capable of treating and understanding the health crisis of really crisis driven patients. They don't understand the moderate crisis patients. But there are many moderate crisis patients who are symptomatic, who get misdiagnosed as asymptomatic, because every time I went to the doctor they thought that I'm making it up, but my blood reports show that I was not making up any of the symptoms. Each of my blood reports are evidence of the fact that something was going wrong with my body. Each of my blood reports. It's just that the right doctor I didn't happen to meet the right doctor for them to understand the overall picture of what was going wrong with my body. But I had the education to understand what was going wrong with my body, and that's why I have stopped myself from being precancerous, especially with thyroid. With thyroid, I have also got help from the universe by universe suggesting me to do energy healing techniques, which has helped me in, I feel my lesions have stopped progressing into the further worsening conditions, and also the pain has gone. Then I have made sure that my phone always stays above 70% battery charge, so that the radiation levels in the phones are high when it goes below 50%. So I try not to use my phone when it's charged at a lower level. I'm trying to limit my radiation exposure to both phone and this ultraviolet light that I use, LED light that I use, because both the phone radiation and the LED lights were causing my increased thyroid storm like symptoms. And whenever my body feels overheated from the radiation in our environment, I try to stay in cooler environments or try to stay without the lights on. I've made some of my videos, that's why, without lights on, when I'm not feeling that well enough to get exposed even to a normal LED light at home. That I had realized, like with my thyroid symptoms, what I had realized was, if I was getting exposed to these ultraviolet white light at an LED lights at home for over 12 hours, or because sometimes I had even exposure to these lights 24 hours a day, I would not switch off, I would just fall asleep while the lights were on. So many days and many years I have had exposure to like 24 hours of light, artificial lighting, which had escalated my symptoms. But as soon as I reduced the exposure hours to these lights, some of my symptoms related to the thyroid problem has subsided. but my problems related to multiple myeloma and anemia, what the doctor has diagnosed as anemia, has not reduced because pesticide pollution is rampant in our society. People do not know how to have good business and food and home hygiene related to pesticide use. People are simply unaware, and I'll make the next video about that, because if you do not stop using pesticides, or if you do not stop exposure of pesticides in your food, water, air, you are going on clothes, or even your home surfaces, most people are going the same path that I'm going towards, which is the multiple myeloma or other organ damage or cell damage related healthcare issues, which can be severely debilitating and makes us not also sometimes be capable of understanding the severity of the illnesses we are going through. Same thing with the doctor. If the doctor is also equally exposed to such pesticides in their daily lives, sometimes pesticide contaminations can damage our brain cells and make us have brain fogs, and whatever information we may have even studied as a doctor or a healthcare practitioner, a person might not be able to join those information together in an appropriate way because their daily toxic limit of pesticides are high, and their brains are not functioning at the optimal level as it should. So there are many factors why doctors also misunderstand patient information, and sometimes doctors just do not have the information needed to understand the depth of a patient's problems. And the major problem in India is patient population study is not done as much as it should. Patient records are not tracked. Even if patient records are tracked, there are no something called, there's a subject called epidemiology, the epidemiological studies and observational studies that can help in determining such health conditions that are escalating due to modern lifestyle based conditions. Those kind of studies are absent in India, because of which people don't even understand. Like the doctor, I'm pretty sure I have myself observed many people in my society, in the local mall that I go and visit occasionally, to have these similar pesticide contamination based health conditions in their body. One thing I can observe physically in their body, some things I can even observe intuitively, because I have some intuitive insights also about people's health. And despite knowing that these people are also suffering from pesticide poisoning, I can't do anything about it, because the doctors in this area are not aware of what happens when you are exposed to pesticide long term in slow doses. Most of them only are aware about the chronic pesticide poisoning, or the acute ones where people are vomiting or showing like very severe symptoms. Those are the ones the doctors are usually able to detect, but they're not able to detect the low grade slow poisoning happening with pesticides. And also, if you are developing organ damage or cancer over time of exposure to these chemicals, it takes time for those things to develop. So while you have been falling sicker over the years, it might take even 5 years or 10 years for a diagnosis to happen. Like for me, it's been 4 years. I am pretty sure if I expose myself to enough pesticides, eventually someday I'll have a multiple myeloma diagnosis. But I do not wish to have the multiple myeloma diagnosis. I would rather not have multiple myeloma. I would rather not have exposure to these chemicals that are leading me to go towards multiple myeloma diagnosis. And because I am just a few parameters short of getting that diagnosis any day. I haven't done testing in the last 2 years, but I have been exposed to enough pesticides to know that maybe eventually if I go for the next round of tests, I would have that diagnosis. I don't know, I don't want it, and I'm doing everything possible to not get it. I do energy healing. I'm trying to again get back into exercise mode. I'm trying to avoid as much food, water, air contaminations as possible. But some things are like the local government has to realize that they are poisoning people by some practices that needs to stop. Malls have to realize they're poisoning people by the practices they're doing. People who are in the food industry have to realize that what are the basic food hygiene they need to follow in order to not use pesticides regularly in their food areas, things like that. There's a lot of things I want to discuss about this topic. So I'll talk about the food hygiene and cloth contaminations and water contamination related issues in my subsequent videos. I hope this video was helpful. If people have been feeling really sick, really weak, are getting anemia diagnosis, but have some additional symptoms going wrong in their body, they need to understand that they might be in a pre-cancerous stage, and the only way they can stop getting cancer is if they will avoid the contaminations and chemicals that are leading them towards the cancerous path. I hope it makes sense. I hope this was educational. If you have any questions, please write and comment below. I would be happy to answer some healthcare related questions. And if I can help you, I would love to help you. Thank you.